Welcome to Learn at Work podcast, which is sponsored by iOS Press, the publisher of Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. We're delighted to host this podcast that will bring together insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions on topics that matter most in the realm of health, rehabilitation, work, prevention, and assessment. What can you expect from our podcast? We'll have expert interviews, individuals who have published in the journal, and we'll dive into conversations with leaders who have shared their valuable experience and expertise. You'll learn about different latest work trends, technology, and best practices. I'm Karen Jacobs, the founding editor of Work, and I'm the moderator of these podcasts. Welcome to this episode of Learn at Work, the podcast for the journal Work. I am thrilled to have Marcy as our guest, and Marcy and I were reflecting before we started the recording on how many years we've known each other, and we think it's probably 20 to 22 years. So, Marcy, I'm thrilled. You're in Connecticut, I'm in Boston, and we're doing this virtually. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here and to get caught up.
It was great. I do have to will fully disclose that I think we just spent maybe a half hour catching up before we started the recording.
That's
So
okay. We needed it. It
we
was
did
good.
need it. We
Yeah.
did need it. So Marcy, you've been part of the work journal for a very long time, but it would be great if you could just give us some of your background and what you're interested in now, versus perhaps when you started your career.
Well, it's funny. I was reflecting on this a little bit earlier today. And in terms of work and my motivation and what kind of has been a key and consistent thread. And Karen, this sounds very, very cheesy, but I have always been very attracted to the concept of work itself. So my dad was a staunch Yankee, and I really grew up with the concept that work, doing a really good job, is part of your identity as well as part of your livelihood. So when you worked, you were very, very proud of what you did and how it reflected on your identity, as well as being really the way that you became independent. You moved out and you gained material things in society, so to speak. So it was really just before I met you that I had done for one of my masters. I actually did a fairly big ethnography looking at what do adolescents learn in their first job, and I was really interested in to find out if it differed according to the organization. And having worked in fast food and restaurants for so long, I actually compared what they learned at Denny's and
Oh
what
my
they
gosh.
learned, yes, and what they learned at, what was it? It was like I think it was the Jack in the Box. And as it turned out, and because it was an ethnography, I was actually a Denny's waitress for 5 months in order to collect this data. And I think that is when you and I met, because I actually submitted it to the Journal of Work as a place to submit my research, which was way back in 91 or so. So with that thread of work going on, and I did learn, students or adolescents did learn a lot about themselves. They learn about the world of work in terms of taxes, and you don't get all the money you think you're going to get, as well as benefits and coping, and customers are always right, that kind of thing. But that thread then took me to ergonomics, which is obviously
Yeah.
looking at the workplace and how work design, fits with the individual. And that has kind of taken me a little bit more into the factories, which I love, 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 and into, computer workplaces such as we're sitting in here. And then, getting into teaching it, but I still do consulting on the side. And Yeah, so it's been kind of a really just a very, very fun ride with all these different offshoots from that one particular thing. What I'm looking at right now above me is lighting. And I also work in we have a low vision clinic here at Quinnipiac. It's Lions Low Vision. It is lovely. So we volunteer and do the low vision evaluations. And then the Lions Club donates the devices, such as the magnifiers, such as light, such as, all the various different low vision and, large print cards, some of
Mm.
that fun low tech stuff. And through that, it sounds very, very obvious to lighting designers, but I realized that with the appropriate amount of lighting, that seniors, particularly with low vision, can see much better. As I said, it sounds very intuitive, but I somehow had to be right in that setting and working with people to really understand that. So I did a study on lighting and had gotten a grant for these ot lights, and basically, with about 60 different older adults who really did not have low vision, they just had age-related changes in their vision, and really found that when they had the appropriate lighting, that they could read much more fluently, and they could read smaller print. So if anyone is familiar with the MN Read, so that's it's basically like when you go into your doctor's office and you see all those E's on the wall, and with the appropriate lighting, you can read 2 lines smaller, which is it's pretty incredible. And so once I started realizing that there's a lot more to lighting than illumination or the lighting levels, that's when I started taking a lot of courses and really got into the light and health aspects of lighting, which is really circadian lighting, which is that's pretty interesting. It's really looking at how our bodies really are in sync with the light relative to the day. So bright light in the morning is alerting, and that helps to set your sleep wake patterns so that you have your circadian clock, which keeps on a regular basis throughout. But I'm kind of getting off topic here.
No, I love this, and I'm sure the listeners, would love this as well. So, key points
Yeah.
about lighting for all of us, depend not irrespective of our age.
Yeah.
What should we keep in mind?
Sure. Great question. So, very, very simply, if in fact you basically need more light, if your font or what you're reading is smaller, okay, if there's less contrast. So, for example, if you're trying to read the morning newspaper, some of us still do that, okay,
Mhm.
you're going to need more light because there's terrible contrast between the print and that newspaper, which is kind of a gray. It really is. So, for example, let's take the extreme. If Karen, in your third, fourth, or fifth career, you become a surgeon, you are going to need a lot of light because you're doing something that's very, very, very detailed. However, if in fact you're going into a waiting room and really all you need is light for navigation, then you really don't need as much light. So there's somewhere in between, which is really office lighting. And the what we need enough light, it's around 250 to 500 lux. A good, I'm going to digress, a really good reference is the IES, the Illuminating Engineering Society. In the US, they're the go to. And Karen, they have standards of lighting for every different task or activity. So you would imagine in the kitchen, you will need more lighting because you're cutting, you're looking at what you're doing. You want to make sure that you're being accurate, not cutting your fingers off. However, in the bedroom, if you're just you may not need quite as much lighting except for at your bedside. What's kind of interesting is you could go into in more detail. Every house in the I mean, every room in the house, excuse me, might have a combination of needs. So the easiest way to think of it is just to think in layers.
Mm, okay.
Yep. So your ambient lighting is that's when you walk in the room, you probably have enough light to see around and to wayfind. So ambient lighting is your general lighting. Task lighting is where OTs can make a very big difference because that's the individual lighting that you might need when you're writing checks, bills, which people don't do anymore, or when you're reading or reading the newspaper, doing something close up. That's task lighting. You might have accent lighting, might be something that you want to highlight in your house, like whether it's artwork or whether it's the dishes in your kitchen, or whether it's something else you do want to highlight. And the last layer is called decorative lighting, and that might be a beautiful chandelier, you want everyone to see because it's artwork. So think of layered lighting, and that concept goes far because then you can individualize it.
So, do you in your role, you're an occupational therapist and an
Mhm.
ergonomist, and this is, your expertise in lighting is a specialty in both areas or both professions. Um, are you consulting with companies besides the volunteer work that you're doing?
That's a great question, and not yet. So it's the lighting profession is very it's very, very large, and there's many different facets to it. So the challenge for me as an independent person is to figure out how to best enter that system and consult. So I do on an individual basis, and for say people with low vision who really might want to modify. So it would be more along the lines of environmental modification.
Mhm.
And then actually, I'm doing a study now with college students in circadian lighting. They're using a light box in the morning, which is really helping to set their sleep. And you know that college students are notorious for having very poor sleep patterns. But what I would really love to do to figure out, to your point, is it could be, how do you get to people who need it? So maybe it's through a specialty retail store, okay, that you could go in if you have specialty lighting needs. Maybe you need an occupational therapist. As I said, right now it's a little bit more, medically based through environmental modifications. The lighting industry at this point, it's still really not so much at the personal level, other than going to Home Depot and picking out your light. It
Sure.
really is a little bit more at the built environment level.
Mm.
But I'll tell you, I don't want to bend your ear too much, but one project that hasn't worked out so great yet is I wanted to, this was an assisted living, and I really wanted to create a built environment whereupon older adults go down for breakfast and lunch, and they have an environment whereupon they get bright light in the morning so that they don't have to think about it, and that will help to set their patterns. Typically assisted living tends to be darker throughout the day, Karen, and it dark light doesn't really turn off your melatonin that well like bright light does in the morning. Well, the challenges were talk about really having to take time to understand the system. I found these lights were very nice. I thought, oh, we can just put them on the tables, in the morning, extra light. Well, the dining room people weren't too crazy about having something else on the table
Oh,
because they
okay.
would have to take it off.
Mhm.
They also were very protective of the fact they had to look beautiful, and it made it difficult for older adults to socialize because you have these bright lights on the table and
Oh,
they have to look around it.
interesting.
So
Very interesting.
yeah, so it's just really going back to really having to understand the system a little bit better before I kind of jump in and make these like great ideas. Ooh, so anyhow, I've
But
been,
it was creative and, um, you know, you take an idea and you try to pilot it, and you got good feedback that it wasn't going to be the environment to do it in, but
well,
what you hoped for your outcome was very positive.
well, I still might go for it in, but really having, for example, I tell my students, Karen, it's such a great or not so great example of implementation science. So
Mhm.
here we know we have this X amount of light. People get 2 hours of light in the morning that would be equivalent to taking a morning walk, but people are not. You bring it into the environment, go, oh, this would be perfect. But now the implementation is really so challenging because you have all these other stakeholders that are saying, whoa, wait a minute, you can't do this because of blah, blah, blah. But I just have to think of another workaround or put those stakeholders on my committee so they can come up with a suggestion, you
What a
know?
great That's a great idea.
Yeah.
So, you've been part of the editorial board of Work for a very long time. What has it been like to be on an editorial board of a journal?
Well, it's really very, very interesting because you get such a diverse group of participants and authors. And I really love the ability to look at their work and hopefully bring it up to the point it's respected as being rigorous and systematic. So, as an editorial board member, what I would love to do is help people communicate how their research completes a niche and how we can all use the research in some shape or form. I mean, Work is a very practical journal, which I love.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
very practical. And at the end of the day, really at the end of article, it's like, what nugget can I take away from this article that I can use in some shape or form? And so that's been kind of the interesting point is even helping authors to really identify what's the gap that you're addressing, what is the unique contribution of your article. Um, so it's been fun to do so.
Oh, that's wonderful, and I appreciate the compliment to the journal. One of the, ethos, when we first started the journal was to be author friendly, and you describe, you know, the process of giving feedback and encouraging people, um, with their work, and I think that makes it a journal that many people submit their papers to. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I find that because I do a lot of correcting student papers, you know, sometimes I'm sure my feedback I try to couch it when it's picky, but sometimes when someone else is reading it, you really want it to sound so professional that you respect the article, and sometimes if it's not presented in a way that's very professional, you lose that overall impact. So, yeah, and to their credit, there are some authors that they will stick with it and they will go back 2 and 3 times, and it's a lovely, lovely contribution once they end, but they definitely stay with it.
That I think that's it's great, yes, because
Yeah.
we actually let people review
Yeah.
and revise, over and over again. So, I want to, in concluding, ask you about what's your why? What motivates you?
Well, I really do love to learn. I love learning new things that are maybe a little bit sciency. So my kids are really happy. About 10 years ago, I think that was also in the Journal of Work. I was really interested in lead and toxins. So
Mm,
my kids are kind of happy that I moved on to lighting. But I really like to learn new things, and I do love the outdoors. I love being outside, and maybe it's because I'm attracted to the light as well, and really visiting new places. We were talking earlier about, you're interested in visiting places and, exploring places. And so, as I move into the next chapter, when and wherever that is, visiting, going to new places, seeing new places, I just love seeing how people live. It's just fascinating to me. So,
Oh, that's
probably
great.
those things make me tick as well.
That's great. And, you are doing so many innovative and creative work activities. So we're going to conclude with what is your favorite non work occupation?
Oh, my favorite non-work occupation. Well, I mean, right now it's I do love planning vacations. And I am planning a vacation to Italy. And I absolutely love, if you can believe, always rent a car and drive. And people think I'm out of my mind. But, it's absolutely fascinating driving to little towns, finding out what their groceries are, what they love to eat, taking classes, pizza making classes in Italy. How great will that be? So I do love planning vacations, but I do love kayaking as well.
Yeah,
We
I was
laughed
waiting
about
for
that
that one.
before, but I actually really do like that.
I was waiting for that because we both love that. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that um, when I travel outside the US, do cooking classes as well. And I don't mind, renting a car and driving, so we'll have to, Marcy,
Yeah,
plan a trip together sometime.
I think so. We might be dangerous, Karen.
Oh, that'd be fun. But, thank you for being on Learn at Work, and, I hope people listening get a sense of that it's important to have a balance, whatever that balance may look like in your own life of working and playing and finding meaning, and, I admire all the different things that you're doing and the meaning that you're getting from them, so thank you.
Thank you.